It's James with Net News Ledger. We're doing something a little different today. Normally, we have Eric Melillo alone from Kenora, but last week he was having dental surgery, so he didn't get on. And we had a great talk with Todd Dougherty from BC. Today, we have Eric and Scott, and we're going to be talking about Bill C-10, which is winding its way through Parliament right now. Eric, I'll let you introduce Scott, and what do our readers and viewers need to know about Bill C-10?
Thanks, James. It's great. It's great to be back. Great to be back talking with you this week. And obviously, C10 is a bill that we think is quite dangerous. Has the potential to regulate individual users are posting on social media and limit free expression and free speech on the internet. So our party is very concerned about it, and that I'm happy that Scott Aichison, our member from Parry Sound Muskoka, is able to join us for the conversation today, because he's on the committee that's studying this bill and is sort of on the front lines of a lot of that work. So I'll leave it to Scott here to fill us in with a bit of what's been happening this week.
Well, yeah, thanks, Eric. I really appreciate being here. And James, thank you for having me as well. C10 is it's a disastrous bill, actually. We've taken to calling it a train wreck. I was calling it a dumpster fire for a while. Part of the problem we have is that the Liberal government was desperate to what they called level the playing field between the internet streaming giants like the Netflixes and the Disneys, for etc., with traditional Canadian broadcasters, like television stations and radio stations, for example. And of course, most Canadians will know that there are all kinds of rules and regulations for television stations. As an example, they have to ensure that a certain amount of their programming is Canadian content. They have to produce 5% of their revenues that goes towards the Canadian Media Fund to help with the creation of Canadian artistic endeavors. And so there's a series of requirements that they have to make sure that they can get their license. Well, you can't license the internet. And so the government, in their attempt, came up with this kind of feeble effort to effectively call online streaming companies broadcasters so that they could try to regulate what they do and produce in Canada. And their effort was not just about collecting tax revenue, which I think is fair. If Netflix is going to generate $1 billion in revenue in Canada, they should probably pay some tax on that, and they should contribute. I have no problem with that, and completely agree with it, in fact, as does the Conservative Party. The problem arises, though, when then the government decides that they want to not just make sure that they collect their share of revenue out of the online streaming giants, but they now want to apply this to social media sites, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, those kinds of things. And so the problem we have there is that if you start calling these companies, like YouTube's broadcasters, operating as broadcasters, they're now eligible to be regulated by the CRTC under the Broadcasting Act. And so the minister continues to insist that they don't want to broadcast or regulate the individual content that Canadians produce, but it leaves the window open for them to be able to do that. And we feel that is a dangerous, slippery slope. And frankly, trying to manage the algorithms of these online social media apps in a way that you can promote what you deem to be, or what the bureaucracy deems to be, Canadianness is in itself a limit on your freedom of expression. If you're promoting one person, you're thereby demoting another. And so our argument is that the internet is a remarkably democratizing, accessible medium that provides the opportunity for everybody to show what they want to show their talent. We don't need bureaucrats in Ottawa to tell you what's Canadian and what's not. And we think it's going to have an actually quite a damaging effect on the use of these platforms in Canada.
That's something that, I can totally understand, because in 2007, when Net News Ledger started, we're now up to 2 million visitors a year on our site. We produce YouTube videos, and watching YouTube has become, it's created a whole new genre of people's self-employment, YouTubers. There's people in Canada like Peter McKinnon, who's a photographer down in the Toronto area, who's been featured on stamps or coins, rather, from the Canadian Mint. The guy's become really famous across the globe taking the best of what we have here in Canada and sharing it. And often it seems to me the government seems to get involved in things where they look for a problem when there isn't a problem. You know,
This is a solution looking for a problem. Absolutely.
we
Absolutely.
we saw that with Transport Canada when they started regulating drones.
Yep.
And so now, literally, to have a drone that's over 254 grams, you effectively have to have a pilot's license. And it's really hurting, small internet creators. It's hurting realtors. It's hurting everyone else. And there is a real concern when you talk about starting to regulate the internet, because Canada, with a population of 35 million people, the internet is global.
I don't think Justin Bieber needed CanCon rules or some bureaucracy at the CRTC to help him become a global superstar. He used YouTube. And this is the point. I think that this big government approach from Ottawa, that Ottawa will protect us from, the big bad world, or Ottawa will protect us from ourselves. It's a real defeatist attitude. I think Canadians and Canadian creators are the best in the world. Just give them the opportunity as opposed to trying to manage it. But this is what's wrong with big government, and this is why conservatives are so fundamentally opposed to this. It's a risk. It's a risk to people who have been using social media to generate an income. There's over 25,000 Canadians right now that generate a livable income using YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Why mess with that?
The other side is that often with government, what happens is that what starts as a good idea, I can totally understand the concept of trying to get rid of hate speech, for example, and getting rid of racism online. But the other side of that is that sometimes that just forces them deeper underground and they surface, you know.
Yeah, absolutely true. And listen, the Bill C-10 is not about hate speech. We have laws governing that kind of behavior right now. This is literally a bill that is designed for the government to try to regulate the internet, and it's fundamentally flawed. We think that any limits. They claim to be all in favor of net neutrality, and yet by trying to get access to the algorithms these companies use, that can't possibly mean that we can maintain net neutrality with bureaucrats deciding what's more Canadian, blocking things from other countries. It doesn't make any sense to us, certainly. And I think that Canadians are justifiably frustrated, and particularly young Canadians. I think it's easy for the bureaucracy in Ottawa to forget that I'm a dinosaur. I'm 48 years old. This is all new to me. Eric here, of course, has been using social media like from the beginning, right? These are tools that young people use. They don't want limits on it. That's the beauty of it. They don't want. I mean, they don't want to have to worry about what the government tells them is appropriate for Canadian audiences. I think that young people particularly are really upset about what this government's trying to do, and I get it. I see why.
It's ironic. My almost 6-year-old grandson likes to come to work. If he doesn't get to come to work, he gets very upset and coming to the office. Uh, he gets on one of our iPads here, and he started making TikTok videos. He came to me one day and he said, "I need this," and I was like, "Okay, what is this?" Because I didn't use TikTok. I'm a little older than you are, Scott, and we live in a technical world,
Yeah.
but the kids are so far ahead of us. I remember interviewing someone from a gym club, and I made the comment that, how do people reach you? What's your Facebook page? And the young lady said to me, she's just looked at me like, it would have been like if I said, did you listen to the Johnny Dollar show on the radio last night, the old radio play? Huh?
Yeah.
Not a
Absolutely.
not a clue. And that's where we get this problem happening where big government steps in. And I know that somewhere in the start of this development there was probably a good idea that just you start layering on layer after layer after layer of bureaucracy, and then pretty soon you can't enforce it, or you force people into places, virtual networks, private networks, VPNs. There's people using those because they want to watch American Netflix.
Well, I think the other real missed opportunity here is that the Liberal government could have taken the opportunity to reduce the regulatory burden on what is effectively a dying medium. The old school television channel, it's dying. The internet has changed absolutely everything. And yet the regulatory burden remains around the necks of these traditional broadcasters like a millstone. Honestly, they won't be around much longer. And yet the government didn't take an opportunity to reduce the regulatory burden on them in an effort maybe to save local newscasts, for example. Maybe that could have been an opportunity. It costs them a lot of money to produce these local newscasts, and they're dying all around the country because of regulatory burden, costs, fees, rules around, what kind of content you have to show during specific time periods, all these kinds of things. It's designed to limit Canadians' choices, but it also is making sure that Canadians turn to this new medium, and this old medium is dying. And so instead of relieving them of some of that burden and making their jobs a little bit easier and helping them survive and helping protect local news, all they're doing is we're going to take this Broadcasting Act, this legislative tool that we used from a technology from the 50s, and we're going to try to apply it to the internet. I have never heard of a more backwards, dumb move than this one. And the Liberal, they are doubling down on it. They are insisting that they are doing the right thing for Canadian creators. And in the end, I think that what they're doing is actually hurting Canadian creators more than they'll actually help them.
That's been tried before too, because we had the Minister of Heritage coming out a few years ago talking about regulating online news. And for example, just with Net News Ledger, we get a sharing arrangement we've made with Reuters, so we get international news. I remember when I moved to Thunder Bay as a kid, my dad's boss told him, when you move to Thunder Bay, you have to get the local paper to know what's going on locally. You also have to get the Globe and Mail and the Financial Post, because otherwise you won't know what's happening in the outside world. And that has become, it was true for a long time. Our part of the country being a little more remote, not downtown Toronto, we get a less scoped area of international and global news, and the internet has changed that. So
Yeah.
now people get information from all over the place, and I think it helps. I really do, and I think it's become that basically the model for journalism has become citizen journalism in many ways, because everyone with a smartphone and a Facebook account or a Twitter account can report things as they happen right outside their doors.
Well, and the opportunity there's also an opportunity here to try to help credible local journalism too. I mean, it's struggling. There's no question about it. But the answer is not to try to regulate the internet. It's to try to find ways to support local news. And again, instead of coming up with some creative solutions to help solve that problem, they've come up with this half measure that in the end will actually hurt it even more. It's Canada is such a small market. There's a part of me that maybe understands the need for this kind of a tool in Quebec, where maybe it's tougher for Quebec artists to sell what they produce beyond their borders. But English Canada, we have we there's only a $30 million person audience, I guess, for Canadian English artists. But right next door, we've got another 300 million English speakers. And I think that if we just get out of the way of Canadian English creators, we've got a much better chance of them thriving and surviving. And so I think like things like the Canadian Media Fund are great. And I think that, the folks at Netflix would be happy to contribute to it. But this is the other thing. They are already contributing billions of dollars to the Canadian economy by producing shows here. And I think, well, now you want to try to get a hold of their algorithms as well. What's it going to take for companies like that to say, you know what, thanks, we've had enough. Canada's not really big enough in the world scale, so we'll go take our business somewhere else. and you can do your own thing. Well, I think Canadians will be pretty frustrated by that.
I think we're seeing a little bit of that starting with the YouTube, or sorry, the Facebook and Apple on privacy, and Apple moving to protect Apple iPhone users and Mac, and that whole environment has become far more user decide what you want to let out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've all probably gone on Google or gone on Amazon to search for something and then watched our entire social media thread, for days. We'll have nothing but ads for what we've looked for.
Oh, absolutely true. Absolutely true.
And they're not going to let that algorithm, that's their business model. So that's not something to give away.
Yeah, absolutely true.
So Scott, I think that'll allow people to get a bit of a feel for what this legislation is. Now, where's it at stage-wise in the House of Commons?
It's at our committee. So I'm a member of the Heritage Committee. And so what happens with a piece of legislation, of course, is once it gets through second reading, it goes to committee, where we're now doing a clause by clause review of the legislation. There's a lot of amendments that have been proposed. And of course, what's created this situation right now is that there was a couple of exemptions in the original legislation that the House of Commons adopted that specifically excluded individual Canadian content from this Broadcasting Act, and the Liberals actually proposed an amendment to their own bill to remove one of those exemptions so that they could capture social media. And so our argument is, well, what you've done now by doing this is, you're not gonna individually regulate what Eric Melillo puts online, but you're going to regulate the medium that he uses to do it. How is that not regulating individual Canadians' content that they're posting online? So they've removed it themselves. This is what started the big fight. We've always thought it was weak legislation, but now it's dangerous legislation. And so we are in this clause by clause review. Just the other day, we had another committee meeting where we proposed to put more exemptions back in to exclude social media. We will see how that goes on at our next committee meeting, but the fight continues. The Liberal government wants control of your social media, and we're fighting to give it back to you. So that's where we're at right now. It's they're eager to get it done before the summer. I'm not too sure if that'll be accomplished or not, but I think it's important for Canadians to be concerned about this.
Scott, thank you. And before we let you go, Eric, a message for our Kenora riding.
Yeah, well, I'll just say, sort of to summarize that, I think Scott did a great job of highlighting that, we believe that C10 was a weak bill from the get-go, that wasn't actually going to support Canadian content creators in the way that they thought. But now it's to the stage where we believe it's a dangerous bill that could potentially open that door to limiting free expression and free speech online. And part of my concern as well is that it appears that the NDP and the Bloc are now actually lining up with the Liberals to help pass this through the House pretty quickly. So I know Scott and our team at the Heritage Committee are doing what they can to prevent that, and of course, a Conservative government will repeal it if it does pass. But my message to the riding, I would also just want to say, James, that I'm heading back to Ottawa physically next week, so I'm looking forward to that. Has been a while. Looking forward to being in the debates and raising the concerns of our region.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Eric. Sorry I talked all the time and you didn't get a chance.
It's okay. That's kind of why I brought you on. So.
To keep up to date, you have to subscribe. You have to hit that like button and hit the notification to stay in touch.